Sam Harris is an American author, philosopher, neuroscientist, and podcast host. His work touches on a wide range of topics, including neuroscience and meditation. In his 2014 book, Waking Up: A Guide to Spirituality Without Religion, Sam discusses, among other things, the illusion of the self. When Sam says the self is an illusion, he means a subjective experience that is not what it seems. Illusions are experiences in the mind, but they are not out there in nature. Rather, they are events generated by the brain. Most of us have an experience of a self, an autonomous individual with a coherent identity and sense of free will. But that experience is an illusion. It does not exist independently of the person having the experience, and it is certainly not what it seems. That's not to say that the illusion is pointless. Experiencing a self-illusion may have tangible functional benefits in the way we think and act, but that does not mean that it exists as an entity. Here is Sam Harris on Dan Harris's podcast discussing why it's important to drop the idea of the self.
You talked about selflessness, dropping the I. I think that is such a hard concept for people to grasp. So let's just take it on now. Because it is another of the principal theses in Waking Up, that the self is an illusion. This is so hard for people to get. I think most people have never even thought about the self at all. So help us understand, A, what you're talking about here, and B, how it would be at all useful for us in our daily lives.
Well, I mean, so the utility is kind of a separate question. It is useful because when you look at the nature of your suffering psychologically, the self is really the string upon which all of these negative states, mental states, are strung. I mean,
yeah, but I think a lot of people listening to this might feel like, I'm not suffering. What are you talking about? No, there are no crows pecking out my innards. I'm fine.
Yeah, and so those people are difficult to reach with an argument that suggests that if you'd only look more closely at your life, you would discover that you're moved in each moment by a sense of dissatisfaction that may in fact be unacknowledged, right? So like you're just moving on to the next thing, but there's a stress in your life that is motivating more or less everything you do. Your life has the character of a kind of long emergency, and yet there are people who are happy enough or lucky enough or positive enough that if you ask them, well, are you stressed out? Are you moved by a profound sense of dissatisfaction? Are you overlooking the present moment, kind of compulsively trying to get on to the next thing, even if in the present moment is full of the thing you thought you wanted a moment ago? They're kind of they're deeply insensitive to the dynamics of what's happening, and if you have a satisfying enough life for long enough, yeah, you can spend years and just have seen no point to this kind of consideration. Well, that's fine. You're a very happy person, who's very lucky, and not in a lot of physical pain, and no one's died. You're one of these people. You're probably not Jewish, but you're one of these people who don't think about death, right? That's like you're not actually thinking about the possibility of your parents dying or your kids dying, or
just for those of us, anybody wondering there, that you're half Jewish.
Yeah.
Between us, we make one Jew.
Right, yes.
And by the way, we're not related.
We're not related,
yes,
no.
Yeah.
No, it's a different strand of Judaism. But, so yeah, there are people like this who just, and there are many good ways. I mean, this is a psychologically strong way to be. It's nice to be resilient, right, and not to suffer much. So some of you get frustrated, but the thing you were counting on doesn't happen, and you spend 2 minutes being disappointed rather than 2 days or 2 weeks, right? So there are people who are very lucky just by dint of genes and upbringing, and they're not shopping for a path to enlightenment because they don't see a problem, right? Doesn't mean there isn't a problem. Doesn't mean that they're not going to crash and burn sometime, right? So a lot of what spiritual life is, or and contemplative practice is a kind of training for the bad times, right? So you're kind of getting ready for the worst day of your life, right? And the worst day of your life is coming, right? If it hasn't happened already, it will happen eventually, right? And now you're with any luck, your bad times will not be as bad as humanly possible, right? It's possible to have, just an unendurably bad life, right? And we're all hoping we get luckier than that. But and if you have the free time to listen to this podcast, you probably are luckier than that. But there's just no telling what's going to happen to any of us in the future. And in the future, as in the present, your mind is all you have, right? Your mind, your ability to be happy or be at peace in the midst of what is happening is whatever it is in this moment. And if it's untested in this moment because you have everything you want and you're comfortable, well, then you don't really know what tools you have to work with when the wheels start coming off. And people who have thought a lot about this have discovered that there are some tools that are worth having in hand. And when you become sensitive to how it is you suffer, there's not a lot going on there. They're not novel processes. It's just whenever you're suffering, really suffering, you are lost in thought. I mean, you are thinking. And these blows are meted out by your own mind on itself through this automaticity of just thinking without knowing that you're thinking. So the next thought arises, and it seems to be you. It seems to be what you are, and you feel that you're the thinker of your thoughts. And this is kind of paradoxical. You think that you're the author. The thought just arises, right, from who knows where. You certainly don't see it arise, and you certainly don't author it. But being identified with it carries with it the felt sense that you are the thinker. It seems to create a thinker that is separate from the thoughts. So if you're listening to me now and you don't really get what I'm saying, you might be thinking, well, what is this guy talking about? Right? So that thought, what is this guy talking about, just emerges, and it feels like you, right? The sense of self is a product of not seeing a thought as a thought arising in a larger condition of consciousness or the mind. And meditation training is a way of recognizing the prior condition in which thoughts and sensations and everything else arises. And at a certain point, you can notice thoughts themselves arise and not be any more identified with the voice in your head than you are with my voice. I mean, so I'm in understanding what I'm saying now. Just notice here. So if you're a speaker of English, you are, through no intention of your own, helplessly decoding the sounds I'm making now and understanding them. Right? So these, like, you can't. It's interesting to consider. I mean, you have absolutely no free will here. It's like you can't decide not to understand what I'm saying. I mean, that's just the word, the sound is coming in and it's meaningful to you. If you don't understand something I said, well, then you don't understand it through no free will of your own. I mean, you can't. This is being imposed on your mind, one way or the other, and your own thoughts are just like this. They just arise, right? And you don't actually know what you will think next any more than you know what I'm going to say next, right? It's just it feels like you in a way that my voice doesn't feel like you, but it is, if you pay attention, fundamentally just as surprising, it's just as novel, it's just as ungoverned by you. You're not choosing it. You can't. To choose what you think would require that you think it before you think it. right? I mean, how can you? I mean, there's a simple way to demonstrate this. So,
but can't you? I'm sorry to interrupt, but can't you direct your thoughts? Can't you say, okay, I'm going to sit down and think about pastrami sandwiches now?
Yeah, but where did pastrami sandwiches come from? Right. So you can do that, but of all the things,
my Jewish heritage,
right? Exactly. Yes. But so you had a choice there, or an apparent choice. You could have said anything, right? You didn't know. So like, why did you pick? Of all the foodstuffs I mean, probably hundreds of things you could have said there. I mean, you can't even explain why you went to food as opposed to cities or movies or relationships or famous people. Or I mean, you could have gone to anything, right? Any category of thing to think about. But you went to food, and then you went to pastrami, but you could have gone to anything else that you're aware of. So, and we know, for instance, if we were scanning your brain at that moment, and with the brain scanner of the future, but I mean, this is virtually possible now, we could have told you, we would have known in the lab that you were going for food and pastrami before you knew you were doing that. Right? So like the consciousness is not the first to know that the word pastrami is going to come out of your mouth. Your pastrami sandwich circuits were already firing probably for at least a second before, and if you had sampled your experience during that second, you would subjectively have felt that you were still in the process of making up your mind, searching for an example, right?
Neuroscience supports the claim that the self is constructed. For example, a professor of psychology at the University of California, Santa Barbara, demonstrated that split brain patients presented with inconsistent visual information would readily confabulate an explanation to reconcile information unconsciously processed with information that was conscious. They would make up a story. This shows that our brains think in stories. For most of us, the sense of ourself is as an integrated individual inhabiting a body. There is conscious awareness of the present moment called the I, but there is also a self that reflects upon who we are in terms of our history, our current activities, and our future plans. This aspect of the self is called me, which most of us would recognize as our personal identity, who we think we are. However, both the I and the me are actually ever-changing narratives generated by our brains to provide a coherent framework to organize the output of all the factors that contribute to our thoughts and behaviors.